I went to the hospital for gynecological surgery, and the doctor was a total hottie. He asked about my history in a cool tone. Have you had marital relations? You're my boyfriend, don't you know? He didn't flinch under my intense stare. Sophia, I need to remind you, we broke up 3 months ago. I was the one who broke up with Dave. He'd been in surgery rotation for 3 days straight, even missing my birthday. I waited at home until midnight, ate most of the cake by myself, and then sent myself to the emergency room, getting hooked up to N4 until morning. After sunrise, I went home clutching my aching stomach. As soon as I sat down on the sofa, the door opened again. Dave walked in, his face pale. There was still the lingering smell of blood on him, mixed with a faint scent of disinfectant. He leaned tiredly against the single sofa, closed his eyes, acting like he didn't even see me sitting there. I couldn't believe it. Dave, are you just pretending not to see me right now, huh? He slowly opened his eyes, his gaze hazy. I'm sorry, Sophia, I'm just too tired. The leftover birthday cake was still on the coffee table. He couldn't even bother to say happy birthday to me. By the time Dave woke up, I had already packed my stuff. My 2 suitcases were lined up by the door. I lifted my chin and announced solemnly, we're breaking up. After waking up, he had recovered and returned to his usual cool and distant self. After I finished my announcement, he didn't say anything. He just leaned against the wall and said flatly, you don't drive. Want me to take your stuff home for you? No thanks. He didn't make any effort to win me back. I felt even worse inside. I called a cab on my phone. Send me the license plate number then. Dave pursed his lips, his jawline tight. Be careful on the way. That was the last thing he said to me during our relationship. Dave and I met through a blind date. 3 years after graduating, nearing the big 25, my mom lost patience and started setting me up on blind dates. I met 6 guys in a row, and none of them went anywhere. Dave was the 7th. The matchmaker said he came from a good family, was handsome, had a great education, was a doctor, had a bright future, and was even under 30 this year. Before meeting, I complained to my best friend, Lily, someone with such great qualifications ending up on a blind date? Either the info is fake or he's got some major issues. Turns out, the qualifications were real, and the issues were also real. He was too busy. Dave was an OB/GYN, a graduate of a top university, and spent almost all his time at the hospital. His personality was also too distant. He wasn't good at charming girls, which is why he was still single until now. Even on our blind date, before we even finished dinner, he got a call, paid the bill in advance, and then politely and courteously excused himself. He was tall and handsome, definitely my type in terms of looks, but judging from his calm and indifferent demeanor throughout the meal, he wasn't interested in me. But the next day, the matchmaker contacted my mom and said Dave thought I was great and wanted to see if we could develop something. That's how we dated for 6 months. Dave was really busy. During our rare dates, he would still take calls for work and even end dates early several times. To see him more often, I moved into his place. He gave me his ATM card and told me to use it freely, said I could check his phone anytime, would prepare pain relievers for me when I had cramps, and would pick expensive gifts for holidays. But I didn't need any of that. You're being greedy, Lily complained to me. He's given you his entire savings. What else are you unhappy about? Remember that ex-boyfriend who called you materialistic just because you didn't split the bill for a hot pot meal? After we broke up, my mom was furious and wanted to drag me to make up with Dave. I cried in front of her, I'm not going. He's so busy he can forget my birthday. He only replies with 1 word after I send him a dozen messages. I can't stand this kind of hurt. My mom sighed but didn't force me. After getting home, I opened phone and saw a message from Dave. Did you get home safe? I replied curtly with an okay, just like he used to reply to me. I'm sorry. I saw the cake you left for me. Happy birthday. Just that one sentence, and my tears were welling up again. I fought back the urge to cry and typed, thanks. Okay. Then the conversation ended. I didn't block Dave, and he didn't delete me. We lay in each other's contact lists, unspoken. Dave never posted on social media. I posted 10 times a day, little things, every detail. I knew nothing about his life after the breakup, but he probably knew exactly what I ate for every meal. After I decided things wouldn't work out with Dave, my mom introduced me to her college classmate's son, Billy. Young Billy is just a bit younger than you, but he's very sensible and steady. But when I met him, I realized my mom was completely talking nonsense. Billy had just graduated from college. I met him for the first time at an arcade. Little girls around were clapping and cheering, and he was totally killing it on the dance machine. Such a childish boy. I waited on the side, annoyed, and suddenly missed Dave even more. Billy won me a bunch of stuffed animals, and drove me home after dinner. Bored, I arranged the stuffed animals one by one, took a picture, and posted it on social media. That night, after I showered, I found that Dave had actually liked that post. This was the first time he had liked my social media post since we broke up. I immediately perked up, clicked on the photo to examine it closely for a long time, and finally discovered Billy's hand resting on the steering wheel in the corner. His fingers were long and slender, with clearly defined knuckles. It was clearly a man's hand. I excitedly messaged Lily, I think Dave still has feelings for me. She sent a string of question marks, Sophia, you guys broke up 3 months ago. Get a grip. I'm perfectly clear. He has feelings for me. Actually, Billy was a nice guy too, but I also knew very well that I was, to put it nicely, delicate, or to put it bluntly, had a princess complex. In all these years, the only people who could tolerate my temper were my mom, Lily, and Dave. Even when I insisted on using a small table to eat river snail's rice noodles on his bed, and ended up knocking the bowl over, he didn't get angry. He just calmly cleaned up the mess for me and even made me a new bowl. I booked an appointment with Dr. Dave online and went to his hospital the next morning for a consultation. He lightly furrowed his brow when I said I wanted to get a subdermal implant for contraception, but quickly returned to his calm, expressionless demeanor. Have you had marital relations recently? I stared at his handsome eyes above the mask. You're my boyfriend, don't you know? After a moment of silence, Dave said coldly, Sophia, I need to remind you that we broke up 3 months ago. He had never spoken to me in such a distant and cold tone. My nose stung, and I almost cried. Marital relations. Not yet, I'll think about it after the surgery. Actually, I had heard that the subdermal implant could alleviate menstrual cramps, which is why I wanted to ask about it. But clearly, Dave misunderstood. He was writing the examination forms while saying with a cold face, for the sake of your health, it's recommended to use sanitary products even after the surgery. Based on my past experience, I was almost certain that he was angry. I took the forms Dave gave me and left, but then circled back and found him standing with his back to me, looking slightly down, talking to a young girl in a hospital gown. I've reviewed your test results. All your values are normal. You can be discharged today. It was a very gentle voice, completely different from the attitude he had when talking to me just now. The girl softly said, then, Dr. Dave, can I come see you again after I'm discharged? She looked at Dr. Dave with bright eyes, full of undisguised admiration. I stood there dumbfounded, my heart filled with a bitter ache, my mind blank. I didn't even hear what Dr. Dave replied. By the time I came back to my senses, the girl had already left. Dave stood a few steps away, looking at me coolly. Come here. Once inside the consultation room, he glanced at the payment slip in my hand and said flatly, the blood test doesn't hurt. After testing your blood, I can give you the surgical order. He knew I was afraid of pain. I suddenly reached out and grabbed his wrist. No need, I actually came to see you today. He was wearing a white coat, leaning against the desk. The mask covered most of his handsome face, leaving only a pair of cold eyes looking at me. Why are you looking for me? There was no emotion in his voice, as if he really didn't want to see me. I sniffled and said stubbornly, oh, to give you an invitation, to invite you to my wedding. The air froze for a moment. Dave closed his eyes, then opened them. He pulled down his mask, his voice cold to the extreme. Hand it over. Of course, there was no way I had a wedding invitation. I fumbled in my small purse, rummaged around, and then said, I forgot it. He barely curved his lips, turned around, and started to walk away. I instinctively grabbed the corner of his coat again. Who was that girl you were talking to just now? My patient. Dave paused, turned back to look at me. Sophia, this is my working time. If you're not here to see a doctor, please leave. His eyes were like a clear, cold pool, calm and still, as if nothing could affect his emotions. The only time I ever saw him lose composure was 2 months into our relationship. That was the first time Dave and I kissed. I initiated it. After the kiss, he calmed his slightly ragged breathing and looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold fragmented starlight. The warm yellow light of the street lamp shone down. He put his arm around my waist, leaned his face against my ear, and softly called out, Sophia. I had never met anyone like him. Just saying my name made my heart pound, my face blush, and my legs turn to jelly. Now that we've broken up, will he do the same thing to other girls someday? Just imagining that scene made me feel so bad I was about to cry. I asked in a trembling voice, Are you going to be with her? Who? Your patient. He didn't respond. My mood instantly hit rock bottom. I turned around and stumbled towards the exit, barely holding myself up. But Dave chased after me, grabbed my arm, and sighed when he saw my misty eyes. No, I won't. Dave, do you think I'm really annoying? No. He looked down at his wristwatch. My lunch break is over. Let me take you home. My heart leaped. I quickly agreed. Sitting in Dave's car, it still had that familiar clean scent. He didn't smoke, and the car smelled clean, just like him. I tried to make conversation. Have you been busy these past few months? Not bad, same as before. He turned his head, quickly glancing at me, and said coolly, But it seems like you've been having a great time. No way. I quickly clarified, my menstrual cramps have been worse these past few months. I haven't been doing well at all. He sighed, sounding a little helpless. I told you before not to eat cold things a week before and after your period, but what happened? You've been drinking iced milk tea every other day. It's no wonder you're not feeling well. He actually knew I was drinking iced milk tea. Did he enlarge and look at every single one of my social media posts, not even missing the label on the milk tea cup? I perked up. I pouted and whined pitifully, It's all because you're not around. No one is there to supervise me. As soon as I said that, the atmosphere in the car instantly froze. Turning to look at Dave's tense jawline, I belatedly realized that we had actually broken up. But I still liked him. Dave drove the car to the entrance of my apartment complex and said flatly, Get out. I tried to invite him. Want to come up to my place and sit for a bit? My mom isn't home, and my new bed sheets are really nice. Dave rested one hand on the steering wheel, turned to look at me, and said word by word, Since you're getting married, why are you still messing with me? Sophia, I'm not your toy. He took my words about getting married seriously. Seeing his cold eyes, I finally realized that I had probably overdone the dramatics a little. I'm not getting married. I just said that casually. I tugged at his sleeve and whispered, I came to find you just because I wanted to see you. He pursed his lips and asked me, Who were you with 2 days ago when you went to the arcade? I said firmly, My cousin. Dave's hand trembled slightly, and then he opened the car door. Let's go. I was stunned for a moment. Where? I have half an hour before I go back to work. Didn't you want me to take you home? My gloomy mood instantly brightened. I responded with a loud okay and got out of the car with him. I tentatively reached out and linked arms with Dave. He didn't refuse. Instead, he held my wrist and leaned down slightly as before so I could link arms more comfortably. He took off his white coat after leaving the hospital, revealing a cotton white shirt underneath. When I brushed against his arm, it felt soft and warm, a feeling that spread to my heart. My heart fluttered. Just as I was about to speak, a familiar voice suddenly came from ahead, "Sis." Looking up, it was Billy. He was carrying a bag of sodas and ran up to me. Just as he was about to speak, I quickly interrupted him. "Cousin, what are you doing here today?" Billy looked at me. I looked at him too, winking and giving him crazy hints. He raised his eyebrows and said meaningfully, "Of course, I came to see my cousin." Saying that, he extended his hand to Dave. "Hello, I'm Sophia's cousin." Dave's lips were a tight line. He shook Billy's hand quickly and then withdrew his hand. He said to me flatly, "Since your cousin is here, I'll go back to work now." I held my phone, waving goodbye to him reluctantly. "Okay, then reply to my messages." Dave said okay and turned to leave. I kept watching him until his back disappeared at the entrance of the complex. Suddenly, Billy's voice rang out in my ear, so reluctant to see him go. "Huh? Ku Sin." I turned to look at Billy. He was smiling at me, his young face close by, so smooth it looked like you could pinch water out of it. He was quite handsome, but I didn't like him. "Thanks just now," I said. "But I'll make it clear to my mom that I'm not interested in your type." Billy was stunned for a moment, probably not expecting me to be so blunt. He lowered his eyes and smiled at me. "But what can I do? I seem to be particularly interested in your type, sis." I patted him on the head. "Be a good boy. Stop recognizing random sisters outside from now on. You're young, don't be so cheesy." With that, I grabbed my bag and walked away. I arranged to have dinner with Lily, and when we met, I announced to her, "I'm going to win Dave back." "Why?" "Because I like him." She looked at me like I was an idiot. "If you like him, why did you break up with him in the first place?" "Because he was so busy he forgot my birthday, and he wouldn't reply to my messages, and he stood me up countless times for dates we had planned in advance." As I spoke, my voice gradually lowered, a little dejected. "But in the past 3 months since we broke up, I've really missed him." "Okay, so if you win him back, these problems will be solved? He'll spend your birthday with you, go on dates with you, and reply to your messages instantly?" I couldn't argue. Although Lily and I are friends, we are completely opposite kinds of people. I'm overly dramatic, delicate, and high maintenance, impulsive, while she's calm and perceptive, seeing through problems pointedly. Dave is a doctor. He's very busy, and most likely will be this busy his whole life. But you don't even have to work. Every month, besides finishing a few drawing drafts, you have all the free time in the world. Sophia, what you need is a man who can always be with you, and he can never be that person. I understood all that. I didn't want to be like this either, but it was Dave we were talking about. I felt terrible. While Lily was in the restroom, I pulled out my phone and messaged Dave, "Are you on night shift tonight?" After a few minutes, he replied, "No." I racked my brain for an excuse. I suddenly remembered I forgot to take something. "Can I come over to your place tonight to pick it up?" "Okay." I comforted myself inwardly. Progress. At least he's replying with 2 words now, instead of just 1. After dinner, I said goodbye to Lily, went home, changed clothes, and put on makeup. I even sprayed some perfume, dolling myself up like a seductive temptress, and then took a cab to Dave's place in high heels. But when I got to the door, I found he wasn't home. He didn't reply to my messages, and his phone line was busy. I waited outside for half an hour like an idiot, getting more and more upset the longer I waited. Finally, fighting back the sting in my nose, I walked downstairs. Walking past the flower bed, I suddenly noticed a familiar car parked not far ahead. Before I could react, 2 people got out of the car. Dave still stood tall and straight, just like before. The night blurred his outline, making his cool and distant aura slightly fade, replaced by a captivating aura of restraint. And the girl standing in front of him, looking up and talking to him. Wasn't she his patient? So Dave didn't answer my calls because he was with her? He said he wouldn't be with her, but was he lying to me? I stood there, my mind blank, biting my lips so hard it hurt. By the time I came back to my senses, they had already walked past the other side of the flower bed along a small path. Maybe it was too dark, Dave didn't see me. I wanted to chase after them and confront them, but then I felt like I didn't even have the right to confront them. The more I thought about it, the more wronged I felt, so I simply took out my phone, located the nearest bar on the map, and took a cab there. I took a selfie at the bar entrance, carefully edited it, and posted it on social media, making sure to include the location. Actually, this was the first time I had ever been to a bar. I was a little nervous. But the thought that Dave had lied to me made me feel wronged again. I ordered a craft beer but didn't dare to drink it. I just held the glass and went to the bar counter to listen to the band on stage. After listening for a while, a familiar voice suddenly spoke behind me. What a coincidence, Sophia, we meet again. It was Billy again. He walked over with a drink, sat down across from me, and smiled at me. I slowly said, actually. When my mom introduced us, she said you were an honest and decent kid. I glanced at the nearly empty glass in his hand. You're really good at acting. He exclaimed that he was wronged. I swear, Sophia, this is the first time I've ever been to a place like this. I scoffed, but after a while, I suddenly realized, why are you calling me by my full name now? It's because you told me not to call you sis that day. Billy looked wronged. This is the first time in my life anyone has called me cheesy. I wanted to laugh a little, but the thought of Dave made me unable to. I took out my phone and glanced at it. It was silent. He hadn't messaged me, nor had he liked that social media post. I looked at Billy. Since you listened to me so well, will you help me out again? He leaned in like a big dog, his eyes bright as he looked at me. What is it? Take a photo with me. I was going to post another one. Billy and I stood side by side, turned on the beauty filter, looked for an angle for a long time. Just as I was about to press the capture button, someone stood in front of us, blocking the already dim light. My gaze dropped, and I saw a pair of fair, long hands. Then, inch by inch upwards, a loose white t-shirt, a collarbone with a small mole, a prominent Adam's apple, a tense jawline, and a familiar, icy cold face. Dave looked at me and quirked his lips. Sophia, 10 seconds. Leave with me now. I really wanted to retort with something like what right do you have to tell me what to do, but my gut told me he was really angry right now. So I obediently put down the untouched glass of wine and followed Dave out. Billy called out to me from behind. To keep up the act, I turned around and said earnestly, "Cousin, you're an adult now. Your cousin can't control you, but you should still be mindful of your image and go home early." He looked at me in surprise. I saw him mouth 4 words, burning bridges. Getting into Dave's car, the first thing I did was take a deep sniff. No unfamiliar perfume smell. But I decided to go on the offensive first. Why did you lie to me? Dave said coldly, when did I lie to you? He was so fierce. My eyes immediately turned red. You lied to me. You said that was your patient, that you wouldn't be with her, but you actually took her home. Dave was stunned for a moment, then suddenly frowned. Were you downstairs at my place just now? Oh, fine. He's reacting so quickly, he must be feeling guilty. I glared at him, tears welling up. Of course. You wouldn't answer my calls or messages, and I was waiting for you downstairs, and then I saw you taking someone home. If you've moved on, why didn't you tell me clearly? Do you think I'd cling to you? Wouldn't you? I was speechless for a moment, then thought that since I was the one who had broken up with him, and now I was the one who had come back to find him, it did look like I was clinging. I closed my eyes and, with nothing left to lose, acted unreasonably. Since you clearly know I'll cling, why did you fall for someone else? Aren't you afraid I'll crash your wedding? I didn't fall for someone else, and I didn't take anyone home. Dave's fingers lightly tapped the steering wheel. Lucy stopped my car at the entrance of the complex. She was disheveled and covered in injuries, so I told her to wait downstairs while I went up to get her a coat and ointment, and then I waited for her parents to pick her up. As for my phone, I didn't bring a charger. He paused slightly. I thought you'd be waiting for me at home. My tears stopped, but I still complained tearfully, "You weren't even home, how could I wait?" Dave rubbed his temples, a flicker of exhaustion in his eyes. "I never deleted your fingerprint. You could have unlocked the door and gone in directly." I was stunned. There was a sour, swollen feeling in my heart. As that feeling surged out, it turned into a flutter that made my ears hot. I awkwardly shifted my gaze and looked around. I suddenly saw a half-empty pack of cigarettes and a lighter in front of us. Why did he suddenly start smoking? I was still in a daze when Dave's voice rang out again. "Since you saw it, why didn't you ask me?" "Sophia, is it because you think I lied to you, so you're going to go to a bar with another guy to get back at me?" That was my cousin." The words I didn't finish were blocked by his cold and sharp gaze. Dave slowly leaned closer to me, staring intently into my eyes, a mocking smile on his lips. "Is that so? Sophia, was that really your cousin?" My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. "The information the matchmaker gave you back then emphasized that your family relationships were simple. I was with you for 6 months and met your mom several times. Don't you think I know if you have a cousin?" My heart was struck by his hurt eyes. A sharp pain spread through me, and my fingertips trembled slightly. Then, Why didn't I expose your lie, right?" He laughed self-deprecatingly, "Because I was avoiding it. I still held on to the illusion that if I pretended not to know your lie, you would cling to me like before, and even..." He didn't finish the rest of the sentence. He closed his eyes and turned his head away. His long eyelashes cast a small shadow under his eyes. His Adam's apple and chin were taut. I had never seen Dave this vulnerable and charming. While feeling sorry and apologetic, I couldn't help but be captivated by him. After a moment, I came back to my senses and said softly, "I admit, Billy isn't my cousin. I said that because I was afraid you'd be angry. During the time we were apart, my mom introduced Billy to me, but I don't like him, and I told him I wasn't interested in him." As I said this, I reached into my bag for my phone. "If you don't believe me, I can have him tell you himself." "No need." Dave pursed his lips, his gaze falling on my slip dress and my tearful makeup, and he asked in a husky voice, "Then why did you dress up like this and go to a bar with him?" "I went by myself. I just happened to run into him," I said, feeling wronged. "I didn't dress up like this for him. I dressed up like this because I wanted to seduce you." The air hung heavy for a moment. The next second, Dave put his hand on the back of my head and, as if he finally couldn't hold back, kissed me forcefully. It was a very aggressive kiss. His breath was hot, his long eyelashes brushed against my eyelids, his warm fingers ran through my hair, and their temperature gradually became scalding. "Help. Sophia." He pulled back slightly but didn't want to be too far away. His other hand gently lifted my chin, and he carefully examined my face. A moment later, he kissed me again. The layer of cool and distant pretense shattered at this moment. He was like a god who had fallen to earth, finally troubled by the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Finally, my legs were weak. I looked at Dave through misty eyes and heard him ask me, "Sophia, do you want to make up with me?" I weakly gripped the front of his shirt. Hearing this, I nodded without hesitation. Yes. I hadn't been to Dave's place for 3 months, but it still looked the same as when I left. Originally, the decor in the room was extremely minimalist, but after I moved in, I bought a bunch of random things, even arbitrarily replaced Dave's sofa with a colorful one, and filled it with fluffy stuffed animals. He didn't get angry, just indulged me, letting me gradually decorate his minimalist home into a flashy one. One time, Dave was working late at the hospital, and I invited Lily over. After she came in, she stared at the mermaid puzzle hanging by the door for 10 seconds, then turned to me, "I'm really curious why Dave hasn't kicked you out yet." At that time, I puffed out my chest proudly and declared loudly, "Because he loves me." But at this moment, looking at this mermaid puzzle that was completely out of place with the dark gold cabinet next to it, I suddenly understood what Lily was thinking. "How about I take this down first? We can replace it with something that matches the style better another day." As I said that, I was about to take it down, but Dave put his hand on mine and gently shook his head. No need, leave it there. The palm of his hand still had a bit of residual warmth. I instinctively thought of that very aggressive kiss in the car just now, and my face instantly turned red. Just as I was anticipating what would happen next, he casually let go of me and went to the kitchen to turn on the water heater. Go take a shower, Dave said calmly. Your back is all sweaty. He said that so calmly, and I felt like my head was about to steam up. I quickly ran into the bathroom. After taking off my makeup and showering, I remembered I had taken all my pajamas with me when I moved out. Helplessly, I went out wrapped in a towel, intending to ask Dave for one of his t-shirts. However, he wasn't in the living room, nor in the bedroom. After looking around, I finally came to the door of the study. Just as I was about to push open the slightly ajar door, I heard him speaking inside. Don't do that again. Your parents will worry about you. He must be on the phone. After a moment of silence, his stern voice sounded again. Of course I will too. I stood there dumbfounded, holding the doorknob, my heart icy cold. Footsteps got closer and closer. Dave opened the study door and was slightly taken aback when he saw me. Are you done showering? Yes. There was still a hint of coldness in his eyes, and he seemed to be in a bad mood. After much hesitation, I swallowed my question, lowered my head and stared at my toes. I took all my pajamas home. Can you find me something to wear? Dave gave me a loose t-shirt. I casually untied my towel and put the t-shirt on. When I looked up again, Dave had already turned his face to the side, and his ears were also bright red. I deliberately walked back and forth in front of him a few times in the thin and loose t-shirt, until Dave's Adam's apple bobbed up and down and his gaze became more and more intense. Then I took a step back, creating some distance. I'm tired. Good night. Dave's bed linens were still the cotton Snoopy ones I had bought before. The Samoyed stuffed animal I gave him was by the pillow, and there was even an aromatherapy candle on the nightstand that I hadn't finished using before. In this familiar and cozy atmosphere, I slowly calmed down and thought seriously. Regarding the matter with that girl, he had explained it in the car last night. But I still needed to figure out what that phone call in the study just now was about. So, the next night, I deliberately took a cab to the hospital entrance to wait for Dave to get off work, and when he appeared, I looked around. What are you looking for? Dave asked me flatly. Your patient, Lucy. I looked up at him. Does she often come to the hospital to see you? She used to, but now she's been discharged, so she only comes occasionally. Dave took my hand and walked towards the parking lot. Have you had dinner? Not yet. I tidied up some things at home during the day, then drew all afternoon. Then Dave took me to a Hunan restaurant nearby. I love spicy food, but he always preferred mild flavors. We had been together for so long, and whenever we ate out, he almost always accommodated me. I stopped at the entrance of the Hunan restaurant, met Dave's questioning gaze, and said playfully, my throat is a little uncomfortable today, and I don't feel like eating spicy food. Let's go to the congee hotpot place next door. While eating, I brought up the matter of Lucy again. I think she likes you. She's only 19. It's just a girl's crush. Don't take it to heart. Dave scooped 2 shrimp from the bottom of the pot and carefully peeled them, putting them in my bowl. I held my chopsticks, feeling a little wronged, but even if she only comes to see you occasionally, I'll still be unhappy. Dave looked up at me, something flashing in his eyes. I won't see her again in the future. I stayed at Dave's place for 3 days when my mom suddenly called. Billy said you two cleared things up. What's going on? Billy? I had completely forgotten that person existed. Nothing much, I just didn't like him. I packaged the drawings I finished and sent them to the editor's email, casually closing my laptop. What did Billy tell you? Billy said you're entangled with a man. My mom's tone was a bit heartbroken. Sophia, Mom wants you to settle down early, but not to toy with people's feelings. Tell Mom, who is that man? I was silent for 2 seconds. Dave. My mom was furious. Are you crazy, Sophia? Who was the one who cried and took a cab home before, saying he didn't reply to your messages, didn't celebrate your birthday, didn't love you, and you would never forgive him, and I told you to make up with him, but you said you'd rather die, and now what are you trying to do? I bit my lip and whispered, Mom, I still like him. There was a hint of almost uncontrollable tears in my voice. My mom sighed, fine, whatever. I'll talk to your uncle about Billy. I have to work, I'll hang up now. Before hanging up, she said one last thing to me, Sophia, you're already 26. You can't keep being so willful. I was so upset. I stared blankly at the orchid on the balcony. I bought this when I first moved in from a flower market nearby. Unfortunately, I wasn't good at taking care of plants. It withered after a few days of watering. In the end, I had to pitifully go to Dave for help. He ended up taking over the plant. I heard he asked a colleague who liked gardening for advice, carefully took care of it for a while, and saved it. It even grew several new leaves. I was very happy and hugged his neck, kissing him. He just patted the top of my head and said helplessly, Stop causing so much trouble. Actually, he was quite busy during that time. Several expectant mothers were nearing their due dates and needed to be ready for surgery at any time. Dave slept very lightly at night and would immediately get up and go back to the hospital whenever he received a call. Even being so busy, he still found time to take care of my plant. My mom was right, I can't keep being so willful. I decided to do something for Dave. In the evening, Dave was reading in the study. I finished watching a movie, then went to the kitchen to get 2 mangoes I bought that afternoon, cut them into pieces, and brought them to him. He sighed, spit it out, what do you want from me again? I whined playfully, how can you think of me like that? I just wanted to cut you some fruit. He glanced at the strangely shaped mango pieces on the plate, picked one up with a small fork and put it in his mouth. He paused for a moment, did you buy this? Yeah. It's really good. I like it a lot. After saying that, he finished the entire plate of mangoes, not leaving a single piece for me, and then got up to take a shower. I wasn't giving up. I dipped my finger in the leftover mango juice on the plate, tasted it, and my eyelids twitched from the sourness. Although I naturally prefer sweet flavors, this was too sour, right? Dave could tolerate this? I carried the plate to the kitchen. On the way, passing the dining table, Dave's phone suddenly lit up. It was a message from his mom, you decide, we won't interfere. My hesitation lasted only 2 seconds. Then I picked up his phone and unlocked it with his fingerprint. In the chat, Dave's mom asked, did you and Sophia get back together? Yeah. Did she move back in? Yes. How about you just settle down? Stop messing around, Sophia has suffered enough. She's still young. I don't want to consider marriage right now. Dave's mom's last reply was, you decide, we won't interfere. I froze there, tears splashing on the phone screen. Just then, the sound of water in the bathroom stopped. I snapped back to reality, wiped the tears from the screen, frantically exited the chat, marked it as unread, and put the phone back where it was. Dave didn't realize I had looked at his phone, but I was completely stunned, unable to recover for a long time. In the middle of the night, while Dave was asleep, I secretly went online and asked, broke up with my boyfriend after a fight, then got back together, and he told his mom he's not planning to marry me. What does that mean? When I woke up the next day, Dave was already gone. I picked up my phone and saw the most liked answer, he's just having fun with you. My heart shattered. I hugged the Samoyed stuffed animal and cried uncontrollably. After crying for a long time, I opened a rental app and started looking at apartments nearby. If Dave really just wanted to have fun with me, it would be too pathetic for me to shamelessly continue living here. But if it was a misunderstanding, I really couldn't bear to leave him. In the end, I rented an apartment in the complex across the street and called Lily to help me move. Actually, I hadn't packed much this time. I just really wanted her to comfort me. Her first words when she saw me were, Sophia, are you crazy? You just got back together a few days ago, and now what are you doing? My eyes were still red, and I tearfully explained what had happened. Lily frowned. Dave. Is he really that kind of person? She rubbed her chin, thinking for a moment. Sophia, do you really not want to ask him yourself? I shook my head violently. Should I ask him, Dave, did you agree to get back together with me just to mess around? Just imagining that scene made me feel suffocated. Lily sighed, okay. Then here's the deal. You move out and live by yourself for a few days to cool down. Don't get mad at him. Just tell him your editor needs you to do some extra drawings, and it's urgent, so you need to be in seclusion for a few days. See how Dave reacts. Okay. I walked over, put my arms around her waist, and buried my face in her shoulder. Lily, you're still the best to me. Cut the act. Her voice was incredibly calm. Remember what you said last time? I asked you who you would save if I and Dave fell into the water, and you said sweetly, I'll save you, because only Dave and I can fall in love. Sophia, if I die young someday, it'll definitely be because you've made me so angry. Even though she said that, she still helped me pick up my suitcase. Let's go. When Dave got home that night, he probably noticed I wasn't there and my things were gone, so he called me directly. I repeated the excuse Lily taught me. He was silent for a moment on the other end of the phone, then asked me, can't you draw at home while I'm at work? I got stuck for a moment, then after a while, I managed to come up with an explanation. There's not enough time during the day. I have to work at night too. You can totally use the study. With you in the room, my mind is full of you. I can't focus on drawing. Dave chuckled softly on the other end. His voice had a cold, mocking tone. Sophia, you're more skilled than I thought. Skilled at what? He didn't finish, and just hung up. In the following days, to make the lie about being in seclusion for drawing more convincing, I resisted the urge to message Dave, but I missed him terribly. So I kept hoping he would contact me. However, he didn't. That night, after I finished the draft, I went downstairs for dinner. When I came back, there was a singer broadcasting live on social media in the small square nearby. He was playing the guitar and singing. I misheard, thought you said, continue, turns out you said leave. The lyrics were too fitting. I returned home feeling sad, and the more I thought about it, the sadder I got. Just as I took out my phone, I saw Dave was calling. A soft voice came from the other end, Sophia. I was stunned. Such a familiar voice. Was this Lucy, Dave's patient? Hadn't he promised me he wouldn't see her again? I sniffled, I don't want to talk to you. Get Dave on the phone. I'm sorry, Dave can't take your call right now, she said with a laugh. You must be Dave's ex-girlfriend, right? I'm calling just to let you know that the person he likes now is me. He's already confessed to me. At this point, the call was abruptly cut off. I held my phone, sitting on the bed in a daze for a long time. By the time I came back to my senses, I raised my hand and wiped my face. It was covered in icy tears. The next morning, Lily knocked on my door. Drunk, I hugged her and cried uncontrollably. Dave lied to me. He said he wouldn't see her, but he actually went to see her in the middle of the night. He agreed to get back together with me, but he never planned to marry me, and he even told someone else I was his ex-girlfriend. I don't like him anymore. Are you sure he went to see her specifically in the middle of the night? Wasn't it just that the girl happened to be at the hospital for treatment? Impossible. I said firmly, I have his work schedule memorized, and yesterday wasn't his night shift at all. Then what are you planning to do? I wiped away my tears and said through gritted teeth, I'm going to break up with him. Then Lily dragged me to the entrance of Dave's apartment building and rang his doorbell. He's on the day shift today. Before I could finish, the door opened. Dave stood at the door, still looking a bit tired. Seeing me, he paused slightly. Sophia? Lily rolled her eyes and pushed me, half drunk, towards him. Go on, Sophia, tell him what you need to say. I braced myself inwardly, then, fueled by alcohol, loudly announced, Dave, I don't like you anymore. I'm breaking up with you. Dave's expression showed no surprise at all. He just lightly curved his lips. Sophia, did you ever really like me? Lily sighed behind me. I knew it. I tried to turn back and look at her. Know what? But she held my head and forcefully turned it back. Sophia said you have an ambiguous relationship with one of your patients and have already confessed to her. And that you don't plan to marry Sophia, just mess around with her. As for your thoughts, I can't guess them. Talk to each other. She pushed me into Dave's arms and looked down at her watch. 1 hour. I'll wait downstairs. If the issue isn't resolved in an hour, and Sophia still plans to break up with you, I'll take her away. After saying that, she ignored my attempts to stop her and walked into the elevator. I wanted to chase after her, but Dave grabbed my wrist and pulled me back. The door slammed shut. He pinned me against the wall by the entrance and said word by word, Sophia. Can you stop messing around? I was infuriated by the word messing and struggled to break free from him. I'm messing around? Dave, you jerk, you just don't care about me. You don't plan to marry me at all. You just want to mess around with me. Dave didn't respond immediately. He let go of my hand, closed his eyes, and then opened them. His eyes were icy cold, filled with suppressed rage. You said, I'm not planning to marry you. His tone held a subtle hint of danger. Then he turned and went into the bedroom, throwing his ID and household registration booklet in front of me. If you're willing, I can marry you right now. But do you dare? Why wouldn't I dare? I couldn't stand being provoked, especially since I hadn't slept all night and had been drinking. I was in a state of agitation and immediately dragged Dave's hand and headed out. When we got downstairs, Lily was still waiting there. She saw me and was slightly stunned. What are you guys doing? Getting our marriage license. Lily looked at me like I was mentally ill and then turned her gaze to Dave. She's crazy, and you're going along with it? Why not? Dave said coldly. I really want to know if she dares. My head was practically fuming with anger. I walked faster. Let's go, whoever backs out is a chicken. It wasn't until I had the 2 bright red marriage certificates in my hand that I gradually calmed down. Sitting back in the car, I turned to look at Dave, and he looked back at me. Calmed down? Regretting it? I put on a brave front. You're talking about me, what about you? He said flatly, I've been calm all along. Then let's talk about Lucy now. I clutched the marriage certificate tightly, staring at him without blinking. You weren't supposed to be on night duty last night, but when I called you, Lucy answered. She said she was your ex-girlfriend and that you had confessed to her, and now you liked her. Actually, I didn't completely believe those words, but at the time, Dave hadn't contacted me for 3 days, and I had also seen his conversation with his mom. 3 things came together, fueled by emotion, and I exploded. But now that I'm calm, I think her words didn't have much credibility, and the call came at too much of a coincidence. Dave's expression suddenly turned cold. He took out his phone and glanced at it. She deleted the call history. Yesterday wasn't my night shift, but she cut her wrist and ran to the hospital, covered in blood, saying she wouldn't get it bandaged until she saw me. My colleague was afraid she would really get hurt or die at the hospital, so they contacted me to come over. After I got to the hospital, she finally agreed to get blood transfusions and bandages. She also said she didn't have her phone and wanted to borrow mine to call her parents. So I gave her my phone. He paused. 5 minutes. In just 5 minutes, she was able to call me, sow Discord, delete the call history, and then pretend nothing happened when she called her parents. And Dave just said that she actually cut her wrist and ran to the hospital, threatening the doctor with her life just to see him. Under my questioning, he finally told me the truth. When Lucy was hospitalized, I was her attending physician. After she was discharged, she kept sending me messages persistently, so I deleted her. Then that night, she deliberately cut up her clothes and injured herself, and came to find me. I informed her parents to take her home. That night, I called her parents and told them to keep an eye on Lucy. She snatched the phone and said that if I didn't see her, she would die. Dave said, lowering his eyes. Later, when I didn't see her, she actually cut her wrist and came to find me. I was dumbfounded. Is she mentally? Not quite right. Exactly. Dave said helplessly, she has a condition called delusional disorder. So she firmly believes I like her and insists that we are a perfect match. I've told her I have someone I like, but she won't take it to heart at all. I stood there in a daze and it took me a while to find my voice, but you never told me any of this before. Because they were annoying things, and I didn't want you to worry. I also thought I could handle it myself. His voice paused here, finally tinged with a rare hint of hesitation, but it seems I still caused you to misunderstand. I'm sorry, Sophia. Dave rubbed his temples. There was a faint dark circle under his eyes, suggesting he hadn't slept well after all the trouble yesterday. I also apologized softly. I'm sorry, Dave. But we're legally married now. In the future, when things like this happen, okay? I just want you to let me into your world, instead of setting aside a separate space for me, pretending it's a worry-free paradise. I tried to say this solemnly and seriously, but my soft voice sounded very much like I was whining playfully. Dave smiled faintly, leaned in and kissed me. His breath on my lips was warm. He responded softly, okay. I agonized for a whole week, still unsure how to tell my mom I got married. If I told her it was a spur-of-the-moment decision I made with Dave during a fight, even with how much my mom doted on me, she would still be angry. When Dave came over with a plate of cut cantaloupe, I was still holding my phone, deep in thought. He touched my hair. How about I tell her? After all, I was the one who suggested it. I shook my head violently. No, I'll organize my words first. Lily, on the other hand, found out immediately. After we got back together, Dave asked if I wanted to take her out to dinner. But Lily rejected him without hesitation. You two are newlyweds, take your time being lovey-dovey. I have work to do. So cold. I could only hug Dave even tighter. After we got married, he kept an even closer eye on me. He memorized my menstrual cycle and wouldn't let me eat anything cold in the days before and after. One time, I secretly ordered an iced milk tea behind his back. The delivery guy was a little late, and it arrived just as Dave came home from work. He actually took a small pot and heated the milk tea until it was warm before pouring it back into the cup for me. I accused him, "You're abusing me." He said expressionlessly, "If I were really abusing you, I'd be watching you eat a cup of ice cubes every day. Can you reply to my messages with more than one word from now on?" I protested to Dave. "I send you so much, I even told you how many times I burped after drinking milk today, and you only reply with one, okay. It makes me feel like I'm being a simp." He looked down at the book in his hand. Okay. Later, I found out that the book he specifically bought was Guide to Internet Chatting Slang. So the next day, I casually took a picture of my lunch and sent it to Dave. He looks absolutely amazing. I said, I feel like the fried rice is a bit dry on its own. I plan to make a tomato and egg soup too. Dave, that's great. Drinking soup is a wonderful thing. We had a good chat. Let's not do it again next time. When he came home that night, I leaned softly against him, catching my breath. Can you just reply to me like you used to, even if it's just one word? I'm scared of how it is now. But later, he still tried to reply with more than one word, like changing okay to okay. It felt like our relationship suddenly leaped forward from the previous stalemate. I was also slowly entering his world, instead of just being a part trailing behind him. Then I couldn't help but start overthinking again. He was always unwilling to open up to me before. Was it because we weren't married that he was wary of me? Did he not trust me? Lily slammed her milk tea down on the table. Sophia, I'm warning you. Your life is going well. Don't start being dramatic again. I'm just thinking about it. I won't go confront him, I said, biting the straw tearfully. Besides, are you my friend or his friend? It's precisely because I'm your friend that I have to stop you from doing something foolish. After all, This is the first time in so many years you've met someone you like this much. If you mess it up yourself, you'll have nowhere to cry. I knew Lily was right. After parting ways with her, I packed a large box of Swiss rolls from a nearby dessert shop and took a cab to the hospital to see Dave. But just as I was saying a few words, a pregnant woman who was about to give birth suddenly went into labor, and Dave rushed into the operating room. He was busy until late at night. Only then did he come out, taking off his sterile gown, still carrying the lingering smell of blood. There was a hint of tiredness in his eyes from being highly focused. He stopped a step away from me. The hallway light shone down, wrapping him in a cool white glow. The smell of blood wafted into my nostrils. He lowered his eyes and smiled, curving his lips. "Sophia, I want to hug you so badly, but I smell awful." I didn't care about any of that. I lunged forward and hugged him tightly, rubbing my cheek against his chest, and softly called out, "Honey." Dave immediately tightened his arms around my waist. I linked arms with him and walked out of the hospital building. Just as we were about to go down the steps, someone suddenly emerged from behind a large pillar nearby. Before I could see clearly, she had already run close to me and violently splashed the liquid in her hand towards me. "Sophia." Dave held my arm and pulled me back forcefully. I fell into his arms. Most of the liquid splashed onto the ground, but a few drops still landed on my exposed arms and the back of my hands. A sharp, burning pain spread through me. My nose stung, and tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. "It hurts." I cried, "Dave, it hurts so bad." It was sulfuric acid. The person who splashed me with sulfuric acid had already been subdued by the security guard who arrived. In the light, she lifted her face, her expression extreme and crazy. "If it wasn't for you butting in, how could Dave betray me? He liked me so much. He said he would only love me in this life, and even if he got married, he would only marry me." "You liar, mistress, bitch." I was sweating profusely from the pain, but I still forced myself to retort. "Ridiculous. I've been with him for a year now, and you were still in high school back then. If you have a mental illness, go get treated. You're constantly fantasizing about married men. Do you really think we're your parents?" I didn't even have time to finish cursing, because Dave directly scooped me up in his arms and strode into the consultation room, asking the doctor on night duty to treat my wounds. "Fortunately, it's not serious. The wounds are only on the surface of the skin. You'll be fine after applying ointment for a few days." The doctor looked at Dave's tense expression and suddenly smiled. "So nervous, Dr. Dave. Is this your girlfriend?" He said calmly, "She's my wife." I added from the side, "Legally." The doctor turned his head and examined me for a moment. "Hey, you look familiar. Aren't you the young lady who came to the hospital for an 4 alone in the middle of the night? You're Dr. Dave's family?" Dave, who was standing next to me, suddenly froze. After a moment, he slowly said, "Came alone for an 4 in the middle of the night." "When was that?" "Let me think. A few months ago. I don't remember the exact date. I remember it because this young lady threw up cream all over the place while getting the 4, and the cleaning lady came to clean it up. She even cried and asked the cleaning lady to tell her happy birthday." As he spoke, the memory of that night in the middle of the night flooded back into my mind. Originally, I was feeling incredibly wrong that day. I had turned down invitations from my mom and Lily because I wanted to spend my birthday with Dave, but he completely forgot. Not only that, but I ended up going to the hospital alone for an 4 in the middle of the night. But today, I suddenly realized that when I was feeling so sick and throwing up, Dave was also in the same hospital. It's just that, like tonight, he had to stay in the operating room, maintaining a high level of concentration, with no room for error. If he had had the chance, he definitely would have wanted to come and hug me after getting out of surgery, just like tonight. As we were talking, new patients came in. The doctor greeted Dave and hurried off to work. Dave sat down next to me and gently took my hand. "Was it on your birthday?" "Yes." I saw he was about to speak again, so I quickly stopped him, "But that's in the past. Besides, you were busy with surgery that night and couldn't get away, and you did remember to say, "Happy birthday," to me later. Dave looked at me, his eyes seemed to sparkle. I curled up the corners of my lips, trying to seek praise. "Well, don't you think I've grown up and become very sensible?" He smiled, leaned in and kissed the tip of my nose, and whispered, "Yes." Even though Lucy's parents pleaded with him, Dave still called the police about her splashing me with sulfuric acid. They were a couple who seemed weak and helpless, and I didn't know how they raised such an extreme and terrifying daughter. At the police station, they knelt directly in front of us, begging us to sign a letter of understanding and not have Lucy detained. She's an adult. She should be punished for doing something wrong. Dave shielded me behind him and said coldly, "Besides, she hurt my wife. I can never forgive her." Lucy's mom said desperately, "But that's because she likes you. That's because she's sick." I was actually quite lenient with her before, hoping you would take her for treatment in time, but you didn't. Instead, you indulged her in hurting herself and others. In that case, let the law handle it. After she gets out of the detention center, someone will arrange for her to get treatment. After saying that, he didn't even glance at the couple who had collapsed on the floor. He took my hand and walked out. The night wind was biting. Dave carefully tucked my hand into his coat pocket, walked quickly to the car, and turned on the heater. The temperature inside the car gradually rose. I sniffled, leaned over and put my arms around his waist. "Suddenly I feel like you were really nice to me before." "Huh? Your attitude towards Lucy's parents and your attitude towards me when you were angry before are two extremes." Dave laughed. "How can they be the same? They're strangers, and you are the person I'm going to spend my life with." Then I fell silent. "What's wrong?" "Actually, that night, I saw your chat history with Aunt Carol. You said you weren't considering marrying me right now." I bit my lip, thinking about how heartbroken and sad I was that night. My eyes still felt a little warm. "Later, why did you change your mind?" The hand Dave had on my back suddenly tightened. "Did you see that message, and that's why you moved out?" I buried my face in his chest and nodded, feeling incredibly wronged. "They said you just wanted to mess around with me. Because you broke up with me before, and then I thought about it. Maybe I was really too busy and didn't have much time to spend with you. I was a little scared that if we really got married, I wouldn't be able to give you a good married life, and I would end up holding you back." He said this in a calm tone, but there was a hint of subtle dejection hidden in his voice. My heart felt sour and swollen, and my fingertips were trembling slightly. "You get worried and scared too? What kind of talk is that?" Dave chuckled. "Of course. I'm human, not a god. Besides, Sophia, you don't know how much I like you." The dim car roof light shone down. He lowered his head and kissed me. The already warm atmosphere in the car got hotter. My hand was still injured, so I didn't dare to use force, and Dave was very careful to support me. I breathed rapidly and asked him in a low voice, "When did you fall for me?" Dave said indistinctly, "Probably the day after you moved into my place, when you insisted on hanging that mermaid puzzle on the cabinet in the entryway." I immediately pushed him away and said angrily, "That late? I liked you much earlier." "I'm kidding." He leaned in again, his forehead touching mine, breathing lightly. "That day, when we first met, I went inside and the table was covered with frogs you folded out of napkins. And then I fell in love with you at first sight." Later, Dave still came home with me to see my mom. The moment we showed her our marriage certificate, my mom quietly raised the broom in her hand. Finally, Dave pulled her aside to talk. They talked for a long time. I originally wanted to go over, but the two of them turned around in sync and said in unison, "Go sit on the sofa." I curled up on the sofa and played on my phone for a long time. I finished the plate of strawberries my mom had washed for me, but they still weren't done talking. So I quietly snuck over and happened to hear my mom say, "Sophia is my only daughter. I never let her suffer any hardship while growing up." Dave's voice was gentle, but solemn. "In my life, she will also be my only wife. I won't let her suffer any more hardship." My eyes immediately turned red. He loves me so much, I can't even be dramatic anymore. When spring arrived, Dave proposed to me. To be precise, he made up for a proposal ceremony. That day, he had just come out of the operating room, still carrying the lingering smell of blood. I was waiting in his office, and I saw him walk towards me step by step, take a small box out of his pocket, and slide the ring in front of me. My ears were hot, but I still pretended to be calm and said dismissively, "We're an old married couple." "Still doing this?" Dave smiled and sat down next to me, leaning gently against my shoulder, to make up for a wedding. I immediately got excited. "Okay. I want a lawn wedding, a long white trailing wedding dress, a rose crown, and forest-themed cake and tableware." As I spoke, I turned my head and realized Dave had fallen asleep on my shoulder. He must have been utterly exhausted. My heart softened into a puddle. I leaned over and kissed his cheek, whispering, "It's okay even if there's nothing, just you."